Okay, 16-inch MacBook Pro, or the 14-inch, Apple's most high-end laptop. This laptop has so many different things about it that make it good, but also not worth it at all. And we're going to break these things down in this video and tell you whether Apple truly lied to you or not. So let's have a look what this MacBook Pro truly is about. So, the reason you clicked on this video, why Apple lied to us about the MacBook Pro. Now, this is a Pro machine and it's seen to be the most powerful laptop on Apple's lineup, which it is, but it's heavily advertised as the laptop that can pretty much edit anything, cross through work, and is supposed to be able to create some Hollywood movie, which it's not. And I think that's what isn't the right way of looking at this. The best way of looking at this laptop is why it is that this is truly more unique in other ways other than performance, because performance in this laptop isn't that big of a deal. So let's look at the more important factor of this laptop, but we got to start with performance. So let's have a look at what the chips in this laptop truly can do and if they're worth it being a Pro machine. Okay, so the first thing we have to talk about is the chips inside of this machine. This, unlike the other laptops that advertise the M1 and now the new M2 chip, this has the M1 Pro or M1 Max depending on which one you pick. Now, the Pro and the Max does have quite a significant difference in comparison to a regular M1 or the new M2 chip. This gives you way more cores when it comes to the GPU. The CPU is a 10-core CPU, okay? So that just means that it allows for a lot more speed when doing tasks. But the GPU, the graphics, it starts at 16-core GPU, and if you go for the M1 Max, you get a 32-core GPU. Does that really mean this is a big difference when stepping over from something like a MacBook Air? To some degree, yes. If you are editing big files, then those extra GPU cores are going to provide some more ease when running through your timeline or doing heavy tasks like that. But the big question is, does this really, create this laptop as the most powerful machine in the world? No, not really, because you can edit through 4K high quality videos in something like an M2 MacBook Air very easily, especially in this day and age where everyone is using their phones to record videos in 4K and transfer them through AirDrop, for example. So those cores don't have that big of a difference, I think, in day-to-day tasks, along with some regular video editing. On top of that, certain things can be upgraded in the laptop, like the RAM. Every laptop on Apple's line can upgrade its unified memory. So say you buy an M2 MacBook Air, you could upgrade it from 8 gigs of unified memory to 16. The same can happen on this. Though this can go up to 64, most people aren't really going to be buying that much unified memory. So again, this being so heavily targeted for people based on performance, I think isn't that big of a deal. Yes, you are getting slightly nicer chips with slightly more graphics performance along with more memory if you choose to do so, but realistically most people, I think, would buy it off the shelf with the standalone specifications, which are so similar to something like an M2 MacBook Air, which is lighter, easier to carry around, and comes at a cheaper price. So does this really make this laptop that much more special, that much more pro, simply because of its performance? I don't think so. I think it's a pro device because of its other factors, and we're going to get into that. And I think its coolest factor that makes it really special and worth buying is the display. So let's have a look at the crazy display in this laptop. Okay, now onto the display, which I think is the coolest feature on this laptop, and by far one of the best displays on pretty much any laptop out there. Why? Because this is pretty much a replica of Apple's $6,000 Pro Display XDR. They've basically taken that display, shrunk it into a 16 or 14-inch panel, depending on which you pick, and put it inside of a laptop with extra features like a mini LED display, like OLED, where it's got these really deep blacks. So if you have those cinema bars when you're watching movies, it's pure black. It doesn't look like the screen is on, and it's got ProMotion, which is 120 Hz refresh rate. All that means is when you're moving things across the screen, it's double the smoothness of what you may find on a regular laptop screen or even any of the MacBook Airs. The question is, does that display make this the most pro device? We saw the Pro Display XDR. Everyone saw how capable it was to give you high quality imagery, high quality video. Something like this is the most color accurate panel you're ever going to come across. And no other, I would say, display or monitor or anything comes close to this apart from the Pro Display XDR. Though it doesn't have 4K, it's still extremely crisp. And believe me when I say mini LED, which is just under OLED, that technology of giving you pure blacks is so cool, and when you start using it, you never want to leave it. This display is so good that even when I went to an Apple store and saw the M2 MacBook Air and saw a display without mini LED, it was just completely different. Like, not having pure blacks and kind of seeing the light shine through, it just doesn't look good. So if you're someone who watches a lot of stuff on their laptop and also wants a bigger screen, number one, you're forced to get the 16-inch MacBook Pro anyways, because unfortunately you can't get a 15 or 16-inch MacBook Air, which I think should be an option. But if you're really into a good panel or you're heavily into photo editing, that is something that really makes this a pro machine, because a display is something you're looking at every day for entertainment, for photo editing, for creative work. So that Pro display with its dark blacks, its high quality imagery, its HDR panel which goes up to 1600 nits of brightness. So if you're watching anything in HDR, it's going to be so bright it will literally blind your eyes, which is a good thing. So that, I think, is one of the coolest features ever on this laptop, and that's what makes this Pro, not really the performance. The second thing which we have to get to is, of course, the ports on this machine. So let's have a look at those. Okay, we have to talk about what everyone does on a day-to-day basis, and that's plugging things into the laptop. Whether it's important drives, whether it's an SD card, all of these amazing things were brought back into this laptop. And ever since 2016, Apple's only had USB Type-C ports and a headphone jack, which is very difficult to use because you always have to carry a dongle around everywhere. But on this laptop, plugging in your SD card has never been easier. But say if you get a MacBook Air, is it really necessary to have an SD card slot? Not always, because like I said before, people are filming things on their iPhone so much now that if you want to edit something on Final Cut, you can just airdrop it wirelessly and it makes everything so much easier. Along with that, this doesn't even have a regular USB-A port. So if you have a bunch of thumb drives, you're going to get a dongle anyways. So getting a dongle for your MacBook Air isn't going to be that big of an issue. But the MacBook Air also does have MagSafe, the same as this. So the point I'm trying to get to is, while this does have so many different ports, those ports aren't always necessary. For example, the HDMI port. So many monitors right now, and if you are getting a monitor, should have USB Type-C. Not only does that connect the laptop to the screen, but it provides power and charges the laptop for you. So it wouldn't really be smart, unless it's a gaming monitor, to go out there and buy one just with HDMI. So that kind of makes this HDMI port useless. Now there are moments where it is useful, for example connecting it to your TV, but again, with so many modern TVs right now, you can AirPlay it, or if you have an Apple TV, connect it to that and wirelessly do everything. So while the ports are really useful, it's not even that necessary. I mean, even this external hard drive is USB Type-C. So the fact that it's USB Type-C shows that those ports are already present in all the other laptops. This isn't that big of a deal. So we do have to talk about the one thing that physically makes this different from the other laptops. While it does physically have a better display, the one thing that is completely different is the way it looks and feels. So let's get on to that. Okay, now that we've spoken about the chips, the battery and the display, we have to talk about, of course, the size of this thing. Now, this laptop is very different in the way it feels, the way it looks, because it's heavier, thicker. I don't see too many negatives in that. Having a thicker machine means you have more space for the fans to cool the machine inside. Now, if you were doing a very similar task on something like the M2 MacBook Air and this brand new MacBook Pro, forget the performance, I think both would be on average fine. This could handle it better simply because it's thicker and bigger, and inside the body of the machine it's handling all of that work more easily, I should say. There's more space for cooling. In something like a MacBook Air, there are no fans, but it's extremely thin, so it will heat up a lot more easily. Something like this I've had sitting here all day, connected to a laptop, and a bunch, this hard drive connected to it, storing huge Final Cut files. editing that on a day-to-day basis, I found hasn't had much of an impact on this in performance and when it comes to temperature. This thing has remained cool ever since I bought it, which has been back in December, and even if it does heat up, it's ever so slight, mainly because it's been sitting on this stand all day. So what am I trying to get to? I'm trying to get to the point that having a thicker machine is actually a positive, because not only is this thicker, it actually still looks good, and arguably it looks a little bit better than the MacBook Air with its more industrial kind of design. Though the M2 MacBook Air has had that design upgrade, it still does have effect on performance, so that's something to bear in mind. But generally speaking, I think it's still a good machine, but like we said, the things such as the display, the port, and actually the thickness and the way it's built make this more of a pro, I think, than the performance. So what should you do? Let's get into that. Okay, now the finale of what all of these different points finally have to say about this laptop. I think this is a phenomenal machine, but it's advertised the wrong way. When I say Apple's lying to us, I think it's not really based on performance. This laptop is very powerful and very, power efficient and power hungry. It can get through a lot of tasks, but most people are never going to cross through this power, and I think the real reasons to be buying this laptop is if you want those certain upgrades in things like the display, better cooling, obviously slightly more graphics, performance, but just that display alone makes this laptop worth it, and I'll tell you why. If you're going to be buying an M2 MacBook Air, I would recommend going from 8 gigs of unified memory to 16, just so that it lasts a little bit longer, especially because you're going to be doing so many different tasks on it, opening so many different tabs and so many different apps. And if you do want to edit on there, having slightly more memory allows for better power and efficiency. Upgrading it is going to be an extra £200 on top of the price it already costs, and that's going to take you to just under $1,800. Now, paying an extra $100 for the 14-inch base model MacBook Pro, I think that's a better deal within itself. But now, in that Pro device, you're going to be getting the things we spoke about, like the better display, more ports, the slightly thicker design to allow for cooling, and fans actually built into the computer, because the MacBook Air doesn't have those. So, though this machine might be seen as the performance-hungry thing that is being advertised, I think buying it for the reasons like the display, the ports, and spending that extra little bit to upgrade to a Pro 14-inch base model is the best thing to do. So, like I said, great laptop, go out there and buy it. If you're just entering the Mac world, I think go for something like the regular M2 MacBook Air. Stay away from that M2 MacBook Pro, that thing is not worth it. It is a design that's like 6 years old now. And that M1 MacBook Air, honestly, it's a great laptop, but it's just better spending that extra 200 quid. You're going to be spending 1,000 anyways on a new design. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the MacBook Pro. I think it's a great laptop. I'm going to probably be having it for another multiple number of years, and I'll keep you guys updated. Follow me on my Instagram, just created that new account, so it's in the description. And make sure, before you go, make sure you click this video somewhere down here if you want to see this entire desk setup behind me. This whole monitor is being powered by this one machine right here. So if you want to see this entire room and this entire desk setup and how these lights have constantly been changing like this. Okay, so if you want to see how I was able to do that and how this laptop powers this entire setup, do you want to see it? Click this video right here. It is a crazy setup tool. You do not want to miss it. Make sure you click it. But apart from that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Comment down below on what else I should do a video on, and make sure you turn those notifications on so you're updated on these crazy videos coming out every week. And make sure you follow me on this brand new Instagram in the description down below. But apart from that, I'll see you guys in the next one, and goodbye.